Well, Dr. Farnham, what is an ad hominem argument, and why is this method inappropriate?
Ad hominem is a Latin term for toward the person or to the man. And so it is an attempt to discredit someone without dealing with the actual argument at hand. And it's often called a fallacy of distraction or irrelevance because it ignores the argument at hand and seeks to discredit the person making the argument. So this is when I attack you as a person rather than dealing with your argument and providing an answer. And Christians can do this. Unbelievers can do this as well. I think we see an example of this in John 8, when Jesus is telling the Jewish leaders that he is God, making a case for his deity. And their response is, aren't we right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? And so they are completely ignoring Jesus and what he's saying and attacking him. This happens to him in Nazareth too. Isn't this the carpenter's son? It happens a lot in politics, where people will attack a politician on a position they hold or something they've done and ignore, is this a good policy? Should we consider this? How do we discuss this issue? And so in our book, in the fictional setting, we try to expose that fallacy that you ought to, whether you like the person, whether you think highly of the person you're talking to, whether they are the kind of person that you would want to normally believe, deal with their argument and don't attack them as a person. Because even a person who is sometimes unreliable or has done things we find despicable can present a solid argument. And that's what we ought to focus on.
I directed the Word of Life Bible Institute in Hungary for several years. And, you always have some professors that have stronger personalities than others. And you'd have a student once in a while who would not like that personality and would not listen to another word they had to say. And this would be similar, right? In the sense that you're in your mind, not maybe verbally, but you have discounted them and everything they have to say. So we want to be persuasive and kind and gracious so that people don't do that. But that happens too, doesn't it?
True. It's true. We have to have the courage, even if we don't like the person making the other argument, to address their argument itself and not simply fall back in a lazy way to just critiquing them as a person.
Well, a follow-up question, how can you respond in a kind and gracious way when someone uses this inappropriate method?
I think asking questions is the best way, especially if the person is even a little bit hostile, to say something like, can we put aside your dislike for me or this person long enough to address the issue? Help them to see that they are not giving an answer or making an argument, that they're actually just attacking, and ask them if we could put aside the emotion of that or the dislike for that person long enough to address the issue. And I found that works in apologetic discussions as well. I run a philosophy study group every Tuesday downtown at a coffee shop, and we have wide variety of disagreements. And sometimes this comes up, although most of the people who come are mature enough to put aside their dislike for people who disagree with them and deal with the issue. But sometimes simply asking the question, can we put that aside and address their issue? Here's their argument, whether you like them or not. How do we evaluate the argument?
How about as an apologist and those who debate, does that happen in debates as well? That trained people that are supposed to be fair in their arguments choose to do something for the sake of, not because it's a good argument, but because it may be effective.
Yeah, I have not participated in formal debates, but in apologetic conversations, that comes up sometimes, especially with someone who doesn't have much experience having a back and forth discussion. They try to end the discussion as quickly as they can, and an ad hominem attack will typically do it. And if you can back them up a little bit, gently, respectfully, as Peter says in 1 Peter 3:16, and help them address the issue at hand, it helps them to see that just because I don't like this person doesn't rule out what they believe or their argument.
Yeah, it seems like Richard Dawkins and some others have committed this fallacy. Christopher Hitchens and other atheists,
yes,
angry, emotional debaters.
Yeah, critical in a way that is simply for effect. Christopher Hitchens was a master at that. But even Daniel Dennett in Alvin Plantinga's book, Warranted Christian Belief, Daniel Dennett says Baptists should be kept in zoos.
Mm.
So that's not a great intellectual argument, but it's just an ad hominem attack. And Dawkins does similar things in The God Delusion.
I had Alistair McGrath on the program discuss this book, which is also by Kriegel, entitled Coming to Faith Through Dawkins. If anybody's interested, they can listen to that episode where he interviewed 12 different people who came to faith in Christ as a result of the angry, emotional atheism of Dawkins. That was very interesting.
That is. That the anger and the ad hominem appeals to some people, but if they're really trying to be intellectually honest, they see that as a negative strike against the argument, because if you can't present your arguments in a respectful way, in a calm way, then you come to realize that there's more behind this than the intellectual. There's an emotional dislike or a presupposition against it.